Elellanena Matthews stood rigidly in the soaring, glass-paneled lobby of Harrison Enterprises, the clack of designer heels and the soft hum of elevator doors echoing all around her. Like an indifferent chorus, the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and polished marble. Sunlight poured through the towering windows, catching on the brushed gold logo behind the receptionist's desk, and making her feel suddenly very small. She clutched her fox leather portfolio so tightly her knuckles turned pale. In her other hand, the smaller, softer one of her daughter rested, warm and fidgety. 7-year-old Emma shifted her weight from one patent shoe to the other, craning her neck to stare at the skyscraper's vaulted ceiling, curls bouncing as she moved. "Mom," she whispered, tugging gently. "Why are you squeezing my hand like it's a stress ball?" Elellanena forced a tight smile and released her grip, smoothing the front of her thrifted blazer with trembling fingers. "Sorry, sweetie. Mommy's just a little nervous. This interview is really important." Emma tilted her head, eyes wide and guileless. "You're the best designer in the whole world. They'd be dumb not to hire you." Elellanenna's throat tightened. It was so easy for Emma to believe in magic, so easy to trust that things would just work out, that love and effort were always rewarded. She crouched down and tucked a loose strand of blonde hair behind her daughter's ear. "Thank you, baby. That means everything to me." The truth was, this was it, their last chance. After months of ignored applications, closed doors, and dwindling savings, she was hanging everything on this one shot. The babysitter had canceled at the last second, and there was no one else to call. She'd almost stayed home, but then she'd remembered the eviction notice taped to their apartment door. Her name was finally called. A sleek, sharp-looking woman with perfect lipstick and an earpiece emerged from the elevator. "Mrs. Matthews, Mr. Harrison will see you now." Elellanena blinked. "I thought I was meeting with human resources." The woman gave a tight, practiced smile. "Change of plans. Mr. Harrison personally reviews all candidates for the creative team." Her stomach dropped. Robert Harrison. The Robert Harrison? The man behind a billion-dollar empire. The man who never did interviews. The man whose glare could send senior VPs into early retirement. "Emma," she whispered, turning to her daughter with deliberate calm. "You're going to sit right here, okay? Stay in this chair. Play your game quietly. Promise?" Emma gave a solemn nod and plopped down, legs dangling. Elellanena handed her a cracked tablet loaded with drawing apps and preschool games, kissing her quickly on the forehead. Then she turned toward the elevator like a woman walking to her own sentencing. The ride-up felt eternal. Her reflection in the mirrored walls was pale and tense. She tried to practice her pitch again, but couldn't. Remember the words. Her stomach churned. The top floor opened to silence. A massive hallway of dark wood and glass stretched before her. At the end, the receptionist knocked twice on an imposing double door, then pushed it open. The room was sunlight and steel, expansive and breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the sprawl of Boston far below. At the center stood a tall man in a gray suit, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. "Mr. Harrison," she said, trying to keep her voice from cracking. "I'm Elellanena Matthews. It's an honor to meet you." He didn't turn, not at first, and when he did, she was struck by how haunted he looked. Striking gray eyes met hers, reddened at the edges, like someone had either been crying or hadn't slept at all. "You're late," he said coolly, voice low and controlled. She opened her mouth to apologize, but something in his gaze made her pause. This wasn't just a job interview anymore. Something unspoken hung in the air, strange and electric, and she had no idea how deeply this moment would change all their lives. Elellanena didn't flinch when Robert Harrison told her she was late, but inside, her heart jolted like it had been struck by lightning. She could feel her throat tightening, breath catching just beneath her ribs. Her eyes lingered on him for a second longer than she meant to. There was something strange off-kilter about the way he was standing. He looked like a sculpture cast in grief. "I apologize," she said, the words brittle. "There was a complication this morning. I was told you brought your child." He turned fully now, walking toward his desk with measured, deliberate steps. Interesting choice. Not many candidates would do that. Her stomach turned to ice. "I didn't have a choice," she said, forcing her voice steady. "I wasn't going to miss this interview, not after everything." For a moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at her, truly looked, and Elellanena had the uncanny feeling he wasn't examining her clothes or her credentials, but something underneath, something rawer, You came prepared, he finally said, gesturing to the portfolio she clutched like a lifeline. Let's see if your work speaks louder than your circumstances, she exhaled, trying to stay composed as she stepped forward and placed the folder on his desk. Her hand shook slightly as she opened it, revealing her designs, sleek, functional luxury wear that merged elegance with adaptability, something she developed from years of modifying clothes to fit her and her daughter's budget and body types. Robert didn't sit. He hovered behind his desk, scanning the pages slowly, one brow slightly raised. His expression was unreadable to trained, to practiced. But there was a flicker, a moment, when he paused on a design inspired by Emma's old ballet costume, and something shifted in his jaw. This one, he said softly, it's personal. It is, she admitted. I made it for my daughter's school recital. We couldn't afford the one the studio was selling, so I made her something better. His eyes lingered on the sketch. Then he closed the folder. You're talented, he said, but talent isn't rare. Commitment, though, that's harder to find. Elellena's pulse spiked. Was that a compliment? A warning? She couldn't tell. I've been committed to my work even when no one was willing to give me a chance. She replied, I built everything from scraps. I know what it means to fight for every inch of ground. Robert looked at her for a long moment. Then, in a move that startled her, he walked past her toward the glass wall overlooking the lobby. She's very quiet, he said. Who? Your daughter, Emma. She hasn't moved once. She promised me she'd be good. Elellanena replied, confused. She's disciplined for her age. He tilted his head, watching the tiny figure of the girl far below, seated upright, headphones in, lost in her own little world. She reminds me of someone, he said, almost to himself. There was a silence, dense, charged. Then Robert turned to face her, his gaze sharper than before. Tell me, Ms. Matthews, he said, do you believe in second chances? The question struck her like a slap, unexpected and intimate. Her lips parted, but the words were slow to come. Yes, I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of starting over at all? Robert nodded. Slowly, almost solemnly, he walked back to his desk and pressed a button. The receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom. Send up the next candidate, he said flatly. Elellanena blinked. I thought. He held up a hand. I'm not finished with you, he said. You'll wait in the conference room. I want to see how you respond to competition. How you behave when someone else walks through the door with a better resume. She swallowed. Hard. Understood. As she gathered her things, Robert glanced once more toward the lobby, toward the small girl who had no idea the man watching her was unraveling inside. Because what Elellanena didn't know, and what Robert couldn't bring himself to say yet, was that her daughter wasn't just a sweet distraction. She was a mirror, a haunting, a quiet echo of a little girl lost long ago, and perhaps, impossibly, returned. The conference room felt like a holding cell dressed in mahogany. Elellanena sat on the farthest end of the long table, her knees bouncing beneath it. The walls were lined with artistic renderings of past Harrison campaigns, flawless models, perfect lighting, luxury frozen in time. She felt like an intruder, a counterfeit. Emma's tablet had died 20 minutes ago. Now, the little girl sat quietly in the corner, legs crossed, scribbling on a notepad the receptionist had kindly handed her, her tongue peeked out between her lips as she focused, humming faintly under her breath, that innocent tune off key. Carefree was the only thing keeping Elellanena from cracking under the pressure. On the other side of the wall, she could hear muted voices. Another candidate. Laughter. Polite conversation. A man's baritone, charming, confident. He probably had a fancy degree, years of experience, a glowing referral. She had her daughter and a hope so thin it was transparent. Mommy, Emma whispered, holding up a drawing with both hands. Look, I made this for the man with the sad eyes. Elellanena looked down, her chest tightening. Emma had drawn a stick-figure man in a gray suit, standing next to a smiling little girl with yellow hair. They were holding hands. A heart floated between them. That's Mr. Harrison? Elellanena asked carefully. Emma nodded. He looked like he forgot how to smile. I wanted to remind him. Sweetheart. Elellanena crouched next to her, taking her hand. You can't just give drawings to people like him, okay? He's important. Emma's face fell for a second. Then, with quiet defiance, she folded the paper neatly and tucked it into the pocket of her cardigan. Then I'll just wait for the right time. Elellanena opened her mouth to argue, but the conference room door creaked open before she could speak. Robert Harrison stood there, silhouetted in the doorway. His eyes swept the room and landed directly on Emma. "I'd like to speak to Ms. Matthews again," he said, his voice unreadable. Emma froze. Elellenena's heart skipped. Slowly, she stood, motioning for Emma to stay put. "I'll be right back," she whispered, smoothing her skirt. But Emma didn't sit. She stared at Robert, and then she walked toward him. Before Elellanena could stop her, Emma approached the tall man, her steps slow but certain, like she was crossing a bridge only she could see. She reached into her pocket and held out the drawing. "This is for you," she said softly, "because you look like you miss someone." Robert looked down at her, stunned. The man who controlled boardrooms, shattered business rivals with a word, stood utterly speechless in front of a 7-year-old girl with crayons on her fingers. He took the paper, unfolded it, stared. Something crumbled in his face. Not just shock, not just emotion, recognition. And then Emma did something even more startling. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. A hug. Without asking, without fear. It wasn't long, maybe 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, Robert Harrison stopped being a CEO, stopped being the cold, distant man the world knew. His arms hovered, then dropped, hand closed around her gently, hesitantly, like he was afraid he'd break something if he held it tight. When he looked up, his eyes shimmered. He turned to Elellanena, stunned. "Where?" His voice cracked. "Where was she born?" Elellanena stiffened. "Boston, at St. Margaret's." His breath hitched. He sat down in the chair beside him like his knees had given out. "I want the truth," he whispered. "Everything, right now." Elellanena felt her mouth go dry. Her hands trembled. "What are you talking about?" Robert turned the drawing toward her, then placed something else beside it. A photo from his wallet. Worn, old, a woman with auburn hair, a baby in her arms, a baby with the same golden curls, the same eyes. "My wife died in that hospital, giving birth." Elellenena's world tilted. "No, that's not possible," she said, voice hollow, but it was. She could see it on his face, in his eyes, and suddenly she remembered her own mother's words, whispered on her deathbed months ago. Emma's father. He never knew. "I made sure he didn't. I was afraid." Everything inside her fractured at once. Emma looked up between them, confused but calm. "Why are you both so quiet?" she asked, looking from one adult to the other. Elellanena dropped to her knees, her hand over her mouth. Robert stared at the child, no longer blinking. He whispered, almost to himself, "She's mine." And outside the glass walls, the city kept moving, unaware that in a quiet corner of a high-rise, 3 people had just been cracked wide open by a drawing, a hug, and a secret finally dragged into the light. Night blanketed Boston in velvet shadows and fractured reflections. The city hummed below, a restless sea of light and motion, but high above it all, in a penthouse wrapped in glass and silence, Robert Harrison sat alone, unmoving, in a leather chair that overlooked it all. His drink sat untouched. The drawing lay in his lap, a child's sketch, crude, colorful, and possibly innocent. He stared at it like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The man in the drawing had gray scribbles for hair and a red heart floating above his head. He was holding hands with a little girl who looked eerily like the one who had stood in his office just hours ago and smiled at him, like she knew something he didn't, like she had always known. He tried to swallow, but his throat was thick with memory. His hand moved slowly, reaching for a drawer, pulling it open with the hesitation of someone about to exhume a ghost. Inside was a photograph, the same one he'd shown Elellanena, worn, folded at the edges, his late wife, Rachel, standing in the sunlight outside St. Margaret's Hospital, belly swollen with life, her eyes glowing with hope. The next photo in the stack was from the funeral, a white coffin, Rain, his mother beside him, her hand clenched around his in a grip so hard it left bruises. The baby, they told him, didn't make it either. Complications, a stillbirth. He hadn't seen the body. They told him it was better that way. He believed them. He buried the past and built a fortress around his grief, brick by brick, deal by deal, until nothing could get in and nothing could get out. Until now. Until a little girl with sky-colored eyes walked into his office, handed him a crayon drawing. and shattered the silence he'd spent years perfecting. He stood abruptly, pacing, dragging his hand down his face. 7 years, he muttered. 7 years. He remembered the name on the adoption paperwork when the investigator had brought it to him. 2 days ago, Emma Matthews. The mother listed, Elellanena Matthews. No father named. No known relatives. Private adoption. No trail. He hadn't made the connection then, not until the portfolio came across his desk. Not until he saw those sketches. Not until she walked in with that child, Rachel's mother, Eleanor. She had always hated him. Thought he wasn't good enough for her daughter. After Rachel's death, she disappeared, refused contact, never returned his calls. He'd assumed grief swallowed her whole. But the truth had been darker, colder. She hadn't just buried her daughter. She buried his child, too. Erased him from her future. Robert's knees gave out. He sank to the floor like a man who'd been shot, his fist clenched against the carpet. She was mine. He whispered, died not just biologically, not just legally. She had his wife's smile, his own stubbornness, the way she looked at him without fear. Without doubt, it hadn't been random. It had been instinct. He'd spent years surrounded by luxury, yet nothing in this apartment had ever felt like home. Now, it felt colder than ever, because now he knew what he'd been missing. A life he could have had, a daughter he should have held on her first birthday, taught how to ride a bike, tucked in at night. Instead, she'd drawn him with a red heart over his head because she sensed something he didn't even know. He still carried hope. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from the investigator. DNA analysis complete. 99.98% match. She's yours. Robert closed his eyes. The confirmation hit him like a punch, and yet, oddly, he didn't need it. He'd known the moment she hugged him, not as a statistic, but in his bones. In the way grief had flinched and moved inside him for the first time in years. He stood, straightening his shoulders. The pain was still there, the rage, the disbelief. But underneath all of it, something new. Purpose. The next morning, the board would call. The media would keep trying to dig into his past. His assistant would ask why he canceled the Hong Kong trip, but none of it mattered. His life had already changed. There was only one thing left that did matter now, Emma. And the mother, who had unknowingly walked into his life with a second chance folded under her arm. The air inside Harrison Enterprises was different that morning, subtle, like the weight of a storm rolling in before the clouds gather. No one spoke about it directly, but the whispers were everywhere. The CEO, Robert Harrison, had canceled 3 meetings, postponed his international trip, and walked into the design floor unannounced. Unthinkable. Robert Harrison didn't visit. He summoned Elellanena didn't know any of this. Not yet. She stood at her workstation, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on a digital sketch pad. Around her were fabric swatches, prototype samples, and a coffee cup gone cold. It had been 2 weeks since the interview, 2 weeks since she had been hired, 2 weeks since the hug, 2 weeks since everything shifted, and nothing was explained. She hadn't heard from him since. No calls, no second meeting, just a terse email from HR welcoming her to the team, followed by silence. It gnawed at her. Had she imagined the moment? The way his hands trembled when he touched the drawing, the way his voice broke when he asked about Emma's birth, and most of all, why did he look at Emma as if he'd seen a ghost? Now, as she sketched quietly, something in the atmosphere changed. Footsteps, slower than usual, heavy, and then silence behind her. She turned. Robert stood there. No assistants, no clipboard, no mask of executive indifference. Just a man, haunted, tired, unreadable. May I have a word? Ms. Matthews, he asked. Elellena's heart skipped. She nodded. Wordless. He led her to the same conference room from weeks ago, only this time no other candidates waited outside. Just a strange quietness pressing in from all sides. The door closed behind them with a soft click. I owe you an explanation, he said. Elellanena folded her arms, keeping her expression neutral. You owe me nothing, Mr. Harrison. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work here. His eyes flickered. No, he said. This isn't about gratitude. It's about truth. He slid something across the table toward her. A document. She looked down. DNA results. She didn't pick it up. I already know, she whispered. He blinked. You do. I saw it on your face that day. You didn't need a lab report. Neither did I. There was a beat of silence, heavy, reverent. He sat down, folding his hands. I never knew, he said. I swear to you, Elellanena. Rachel died in childbirth. They told me the baby didn't survive. There was no funeral, no viewing, just a closed door and silence. I was young, grief-stricken. I didn't ask enough questions. I believe you, she said quietly. My mother, she told me before she died, about Rachel, about you. She said she did it to protect Emma from you. His expression darkened, but not with anger, with pain. She thought I was a danger. She thought you'd take Emma away, that you'd win in court. She didn't trust powerful men. He nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of it. You, I didn't know until last year. She kept the truth from me too. A long pause. Then, in a voice that trembled beneath its strength, he asked, "Can I see her?" Elellanena hesitated. "She remembers you." His breath hitched. She drew another picture, she said. "You're in it again. This time, you're smiling." His mouth twitched. A smile almost appeared then faded. "I don't want to confuse her," he said. "I don't want to just insert myself." "Then don't," Elellanena said, standing slowly. "Be present, not powerful. She doesn't care that you own the building. She cares that you listen to her drawing." Robert stood to. "Will you allow me to be in her life? She's not a company," Elellanena said. "You don't win her. You show up for her. You earn her." His nod was small, but heavy with meaning. "When she has a parent-teacher conference this afternoon, I was going to go alone." He looked surprised. "You want me there?" "I don't know what I want yet," she said honestly. "But Emma, she might." A pause. "I'll be there," he said. She walked to the door, paused, looked back. "She wears blue on days she wants to feel brave," she said softly. "She'll be wearing blue today." And then she was gone. Robert stood, alone in the room, the DNA report still on the table. He picked it up and stared at the numbers again, proof of what his heart already knew. For the first time in years, he wasn't preparing for a board meeting, a quarterly review, or a hostile merger. He was preparing to show up for a little girl who had unknowingly given him a life back. This wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a beginning, and beginnings were everything. The cemetery was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that seemed to echo, like the ground itself was holding its breath. The air was cold despite the summer sky, the breeze tugging at Elellenena's coat as she walked. The narrow gravel path between headstones, Emma's small hand nestled inside hers. The child was uncharacteristically quiet, her usual bounce subdued to a thoughtful walk, gaze trailing over names carved in stone. "She liked roses," Emma said. Lifting the bouquet, they carried a tangle of red and white blooms tied with a blue ribbon. "She told me once, the pink ones made her sad." "She told you that?" Elellanena asked. Eyebrows raised, Emma nodded. She said pink roses reminded her of someone she couldn't forgive. Elellanena didn't reply. She didn't know how to. They stopped before the grave. Millionaire Matthews, beloved mother, devoted protector, a woman made of iron will and framed secrets. Elellanena knelt to arrange the flowers. Emma stood beside her, fingers trailing over the engraving. Then, as if on cue, she stepped back and let her mother speak. "I still don't know if you were trying to protect us or punish us," Elellanena murmured, her voice catching. "Maybe it was both, but I deserved the truth, and so did he." She stood slowly, brushing the grass from her knees, but her body went rigid when she heard the sound of gravel shifting behind her. Footsteps, slow, measured. She didn't need to turn. She knew who it was. Robert. He walked up the path like he'd walked through a war to get there. His suit was charcoal gray, but his eyes, those haunted, familiar eyes, looked like they hadn't closed in days. He stopped a few paces behind them. "Emma, turn first." "You came," she said softly. "I said I would," Robert replied, his voice lower than usual, almost reverent. "I didn't know this is where you were coming." "I wasn't hiding it," Elellanena said, still facing the grave. "I just didn't think you were ready." He took another step forward. "I visited my wife's grave 100 times, he said, "but never came to this one." Elellanena turned slowly, her eyes narrowed, guarded. "What are you saying?" Robert looked down at the headstone. "My wife's mother, Rachel's mother. This is her grave too." Elellenena's breath stopped. "What?" He gestured to the smaller stone beside it, one she'd never looked at closely before. "Rachel Harrison, taken too soon. Forever a mother, even if just for a moment." Elellenena's knees buckled. "No, That's not possible. That's not. She buried them together, Robert said. Rachel and your mother knew each other. They were family. The world tilted. Robert pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded letter, old, faded, the ink smudged by time and saltwater tears. It's from your mother, to mine. She never mailed it, but the investigator found it with the adoption paperwork. It explains everything. Elellanena took it with trembling hands and read, I couldn't let him take her. He would have won. Money always wins. I loved Rachel, but I hated what her world did to her. She trusted him, and look what it cost her. I'll raise the child myself. I'll name her Emma, and she'll never know what she lost, because if she never meets him, she'll never miss him. Elellanena dropped the letter. Emma stood between them, wide-eyed and quiet. She lied to both of us, Elellanena whispered. All these years. Robert looked up, the wind teasing at his hair. She thought she was doing the right thing, but secrets like this, they rot people from the inside. His voice broke. I've been rotting for years. There was a long silence. Then Emma spoke. I'm not mad at her, she said, looking down at the grave. I think she was scared. Robert crouched to meet her eye level. Do you know who I am, Emma? Emma nodded. You're the man who didn't smile, but you're better now. He swallowed hard. I'm also your father. She tilted her head. I already knew that. Elellanena blinked. What? I knew it when I hugged him. Emma said simply, you can feel that kind of thing, right here. She pointed to her chest. Robert closed his eyes. His lips trembled. I don't expect you to call me anything you don't want to, he said carefully, but I'd like to be in your life if you'll have me. Emma didn't answer with words. She stepped forward and took his hand, small, warm, certain. Elellanena stood behind them, her world reassembled and unrecognizable. Everything she thought she knew about her mother, her past, her daughter's origin, was fractured now, but from the cracks, something unexpected bloomed. Forgiveness. And maybe, just maybe, family. The rooftop garden of Harrison Enterprises was a secret only a few knew, a glass-walled oasis, suspended above the noise of Boston, filled with living things that dared to grow where still ruled. It was Robert Harrison's private sanctuary, but today, he left the doors open. Wind whispered through silver-leaf trees. Emma spun slowly in circles, her shoes crunching on gravel, chasing sunbeams like a child untouched by everything that had come before. She wore a sky-blue dress, the same color she always chose on brave days. Robert watched her from the bench, his hand clutching a velvet box he hadn't dared to open yet. Elellanena stood at the edge of the garden path, watching both of them. Neither said anything for a long time. Have you told the board? She finally asked. Robert didn't look at her. No. She nodded. Are you going to? I don't know. You're not afraid of them, so what's stopping you? He turned, eyes meeting hers for the first time since that day at the cemetery. I'm afraid of you. Her brow furrowed. Why? Because I've been a ghost in your life, and now I want to be flesh and blood. That's not something I can demand. Elellanena took a slow step toward him. You didn't ask to be cut out of our lives. Robert, you were erased. I was lied to. Emma was hidden. His fingers tightened around the box. And yet, I can't stop wondering if it would have mattered. If I'd known the truth back then, I might have failed her anyway. Emma's laugh rang out like a bell. She had stopped spinning and now walked toward them, holding something behind her back. Elellanena reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She drew this yesterday, she said, told me I wasn't allowed to see it until Mr. Harrison smiles like he means it. Robert chuckled under his breath. Smart kid. She handed him the drawing. 3 figures, a woman with long brown hair, a tall man with gray streaks, and a little girl with arms stretched wide. They stood under a tree. Beneath a heart drawn in red crayon, there was a single word written at the bottom, ours. He folded it carefully, as if the slightest bend might shatter it. Emma finally arrived in front of him and held up her hands. I made something for you, she said shyly, but it's a surprise. Robert knelt. I like surprises. She pulled her hands from behind her back and revealed a paper crown taped, glittered, a little crooked. It's for when you come to my class on Friday, she explained. It's Heroes Day. You're supposed to dress up like your hero, but I don't want you to pretend. I want you to come as you. Robert's throat closed. He took the crown, placed it on his head without hesitation, and said, then, I'll be there, and I'll wear this like it's made of gold. Emma grinned and ran off again, satisfied. Elellanena stepped closer now, folding her arms, but her expression softened. She doesn't understand what you've lost. She only sees what you've become. He nodded slowly. She's giving me more grace than I deserve. She's giving you what you need. There's a difference. There was a pause. Then Robert held out the velvet box. I know this doesn't fix anything, but it belonged to Rachel. She wanted our child to have it. Elellanena opened it. Inside was a locket, silver, antique, delicate. I've been carrying it in my coat for years, he whispered. Waiting for, I don't even know what. She'll love it, Elellanena said. She loves things with stories. Robert stood, voice low. Do you? She hesitated. Only when they have honest endings, she said, even if they're messy. He looked at her, truly looked in for the first time. She saw not the CEO, not the tycoon, not the grieving husband. She saw the father. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, he said. I'm asking for your trust. Elellanena met his gaze, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. Then let's build something better than a story, she said. Let's give her a life where no one has to wonder if they were wanted. And without another word, she took his hand. Down below, Boston pulsed and roared with the noise of a world always moving forward. But up here, in a garden above the chaos, a man who thought he had everything and a woman who thought she'd lost it all stood still together. Are no longer strangers, not quite a family yet, but something beautifully close. The end.